For a fact, studies have shown that workplace interruptions, for example, consume up to 2.5 hours a day, lowering productivity by 40%.
Wow.
So imagine that in dentistry, when you're working, that could create more stress and more errors.
Hey everybody, my name is David Rice. I'm the chief editor here at DentistryIQ with this week.
Anastasia Turchetta.
Hey Anastasia, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm excellent. So listen, we need to talk about something that every dental practice struggles with, and I'm going to say healthy boundaries. So you know a thing or two about that.
Yes, I do.
All right, listen. We're going to break this up into three categories. Today's category, I want to talk about the boundaries between dentist and teams. So, why are boundaries so important between the dentist and the team? Like, why are they essential to have a healthy culture? And I'm going to say also, dentists, if you're tuning in here, to be productive.
That's a great question, David. And first of all, thank you for having me on here to talk about healthy boundaries. It's funny because of all the years that we've been in dentistry, I myself was even so hyper focused on clinical care and everything else, not realizing that boundaries really do need to exist. So to answer your question, we got to take it to being a fun fact kind of place. But for a fact, studies have shown that workplace interruptions, for example, consume up to 2.5 hours a day, lowering productivity by 40%.
Wow.
So imagine that in dentistry, when you're working, that could create more stress and more errors. So the reason that we need boundaries in place is to keep us basically in a focused lane, a focused mindset. And as you know, my healthy boundaries, I focus on identifying, setting, communicating, and enforcing with our time, emotions, and our energy. And we're talking time, and that is right in the lane of dentistry and our patients and our team, let alone the emotions that we bring into the practice within ourselves and then with our patients. And then that energy, what do we carry around? So if you're looking at it from a standpoint of productivity and how that could invite stress and error, it begs us to set those boundaries.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, and I would love your perspective as a former team member, not in my practice, but in others. As a dentist, what I know is I always felt like team members came to me thinking like, oh, this is my one problem, except there's 15 of you. So those problems stack. And talk about an energy drain, an emotional drain, and a time suck. That's the thing. How about from your standpoint as a team member to a dentist? I would imagine it looks a little different.
It's a great question because like sometimes I feel as team members where we are that schedule is the lane and we try to live by it, but then there's also times when, if a hygienist is going to get the dentist and you hear that just one more second, and it's never a second, it's never a minute, because even if it was, it's going to be taking you longer to get to the room and then do your pleasantries and all the things. And I feel sometimes we don't take that into account. And that's already adding stress then onto the hygienist to stay on time. Because if that's a boundary for your patients, it all ripples. And it starts with you, though, in leadership. And as the dentist, we look to you. We want someone, we're working with you and for you, that we really do need someone to guide us instead of off the rails, so to speak.
Yeah. So okay. So that's why we need them. Like, what happens if as a dentist, like I don't set them?
If you don't set them, then that's you could take that in a multitude of ways. So let's go first with you need to set like huddle times. So you're looking at that, and that really sets the tone for the morning. It helps understand where the roles are. I feel a lot of times if you don't set them, it's very blurred. And if boundaries aren't against and being so strict, but they just help us understand what to expect, whose role is what, and how we can communicate with each other. Because even though we're taught scripts so often with our patients, we're really not taught how to address them with ourselves. So, for example, you're setting a boundary by saying, I need y'all here at this certain time because this is really important. This is really valuable. if you do not inject that into your script to your team, then of course, I mean, hey, what's me come strolling in 6 minutes into the huddle time? How do you hold me accountable to me as a team player that could feel like it's blurred? So, I mean, you do need to come up with these different things. So I would say starting by looking at the struggle and then looking at the solution. That's how I
Yeah.
would say that you would start. Because if you don't start, what you're modeling to me is not leadership. So I can take advantage of that as a team member. Does that make sense?
Ooh, that, yeah, yes. And I've never witnessed that in my own practice, just I've heard about it through others. So, all right, final words of wisdom, like what does everybody really need to take home when it comes to the dentist and the team and boundaries between us?
What you need to take home is thinking of yourself as a car or a vehicle. And if you don't have brakes, you're going to crash. So think of boundaries like that. They really do help to protect us, to keep us safe. They help us to protect our time. They help us to protect our emotions and our energy. So that's the takeaway today is I would say, look at where you're at. Or how are your brakes doing? Because just like a vehicle, sometimes we have to get our brakes, fixed. There's always maintenance for them. But where are you at and how many times a day does that impact you?
Ooh, I love that. All right, everybody, listen, thank you for tuning in. We're going to bring Anastasia back because boundaries between dentists and teams are not the only boundaries. We need them between team member and team member. We need them together as a practice with our patients. And I love that analogy of a car because when everything's new, it turns out when we set ourselves up for success, this really works. But if we've been driving our car for a while and we haven't thought about boundaries, we've got to find a way to integrate. Anastasia, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.